Okay, hello and good morning, brothers and sisters, and welcome to the Family Life Conference. Thank you, Bernard, for that very kind and gentle introduction. And I'm very happy to be here today. Okay, really happy to be here today with you. And we've got 144 participants joining us on Zoom, and it's really lovely to see all of you here today. And I hope we'll have some chance to interact with each other as we go along today. Now, I'm very happy to be here, very thrilled to be here for a particular reason, because the Catholic Family Life, as it is called today, began its life way back in 1985 as the Family Life Society. And it was founded by my own confrere, Father Edmund Dunn. After many years of working with engaged couples, with marriage encounter, with counseling, and also working in the tribunal for marriages as a defender of the bond because he was a canon lawyer, he felt a real need to reach out and to minister to married couples and families that he saw were in need. And he was encouraged to do so by then Archbishop Gregory Yong. And so he started the Family Life Society, and it has grown so much, to all the services that it provides today. So I'm really very thrilled to be here, and it's a great honor for me in some way to walk in the footsteps of my elder brother in the congregation, also to be here with you today. And I guess in a way it's a homecoming or coming full circle for my own Redemptorist community as well. Thank you so much for having me, and thanks to all the family, Catholic Family Life family, for inviting me here today. So today's the theme of today's session, or the theme of the whole conference, is Amoris Laetitia, the joy of love, and of course that comes from the exhortation of Pope Francis. Right? I've been reading this a lot the last few months to prepare for this event, so it's got some great insights, and we're going to be sharing quite a number of those insights today. Okay, first of all, we're going to be talking about the Catholic family, the joy of love in families, and we're going to be reflecting on this idea of, well, what's a Catholic family? We use that term quite a lot, no? We say my family is a Catholic family, I came from a Catholic family, I was born into a Catholic family. But what is a Catholic family? Okay, I want to hear from you, okay, what you think is a Catholic family. Bernard introduced the Padlet app just a while ago, so I noticed that a number of you all had already joined up. So we'll share the screen, and I'd like to see from you or hear from you what you believe is a Catholic family. Okay? So get typing, off you go. Okay, so maybe I'll start picking up on some of those responses already. Yeah? Okay, here's one. A Catholic family is one that loves unconditionally. Very good. A family that prays together. Indeed. Puts God first. I thought I saw that. Yeah, love God first. Places God at the center of their life. Good one. Christ to be the center of their marriage and family. Faith in Jesus and strives to live by the values and vision that Jesus taught. I like that one. Yeah. Built upon God. Thank you for your responses. Keep them coming. This is wonderful. Yeah. I won't be able to read all of them from where I am sitting, but they're there for you to reflect on as we go on the session. Strives daily to love each other even when it feels difficult. Yeah, so loving each other is not always a very easy thing. We always say, yes, we should love one another. Maybe 6 days of the week, but then something happens on the 7th day, and then things get a little bit tough. But we are called to forgive and move on and start loving each other again. Yeah. Family is why I wake up every day. Very good. I hope it's not only because you have to wake up and cook breakfast or send the kids off, okay? Something that you want to live for. Being supportive, accepting one another unconditionally, being forgiving and understanding. Yeah. The unconditional acceptance, it's something that many practitioners would say is very real. Yeah. When people really, really hit rock bottom in their lives, often it's then that they realize that their families are the ones who are really the ones who are there for them. Family who love and serve one another, putting God in the center of their lives. Yeah, very good. I think I read that one before. Love and forgiveness flourish. Christ as the foundation. Okay. Okay, thank you very much for all your responses, okay? Now, I particularly like those responses that spoke a lot about faith in Christ, the values and virtues of the gospel that you're trying very hard to live out in your life, yeah? That you're trying to live together as a family. So we're going to go into our first input for today, which is about looking at the teaching of the church on marriage and family. So here's the point that I want to make, and we're going to make a number of points, but they're all sub-points of the one main thing that I want to say is that God is the author of marriage and family life. That's the thing to keep in mind. Yeah. Okay. Now here's something, okay, to get your head around. Imagine we turn the clock back to really ancient times, and we think of a tribal culture that is living far away from any other civilization. And in this tribal culture, cut off, as it were, from the rest of the world, they have a ceremony of marriage where a man and woman come together and start a family. That's amazing, isn't it? Because when you look back at human civilizations, every culture, every religion celebrates and honors marriage and the family. It's a man and woman coming together to start a family. Everybody has it. And here in our multiracial and multicultural society in Singapore, we see every religion and faith having its own particular form of celebration of marriage. We get invited to a Muslim wedding or a Hindu wedding or a Christian wedding, and each of these has their own particular dynamics and manner of celebration. But every culture and every religion has marriage and honors family. So where did this come from? How did human beings have this idea that men and women should come together, have children, have a family, and we decided that this is the best way in which children should be brought up? Is it a human invention? Now, the church believes very strongly that it is not a human invention. God is the author of this reality. God is the author of marriage and family life, and He intended this right from the very beginning when God created the universe, created the world, created humanity. Marriage and family life are part of the plan of God and has been revealed to us by God. And so we are trying in our Christian faith to be faithful to that revelation and plan of God, the plan that God has revealed to us. So because this is God's plan, the church believes that marriage and family life are very decisive for society. When we have good marriages, solid families, these now will be the building block of society and will create a happy and good society. When we have good families, good marriages, then it forms a healthy society and a healthy church. Marriages start to fall apart, families start to break up. Next, you're going to have a chaotic society and a chaotic church. Because it's all part of the plan of God. If we don't follow the plan of God, then it leads to chaos in our lives. We live out faithfully the plan of God in our lives, and that will lead to fulfillment, joy, happiness, and good order. The next thing the church wants to say very, very much is that God's plan is always good news. Yeah? God's plan is always good news. I got some good news this morning. Nobody told me anything, but as I was driving into the car park here at St. Francis Xavier Major Seminary, where we are recording this, I realized that there was a wedding going on in church, and the guests were arriving, and I thought I saw the bridal car coming in. So I thought this is good news. And as just one couple is starting off their family life together today, just a few meters away from where we are celebrating family life as it is lived out by hundreds of thousands of Catholics here in Singapore and beyond. It's good news. You know, when we go for wedding masses sometimes, priests like to make a lot of jokes during wedding homilies, So all these old jokes sounds a bit lame some of them. The engagement ring, wedding ring, suffering, and then the priest will ask the husband to hold the wife's hand and then say, remember this moment because this is the last time you'll have the upper hand. We make all these kinds of jokes. I don't make this kind of jokes at weddings. Okay, other priests make these jokes. So when we use humor like this, we seem to say that, marriage is good news, but then there's also all this other nonsense and difficulties and challenges that come with it. But we must remember that in the revelation of God, in the teaching of our faith, that this is a wonderful thing. This is really good news, and we'll reflect a little bit more about that later. And it's important, I think, for us as a church to remind people how good this good news actually is. This is God's plan for us, and God loves us so much that God does not want us to be suffering. God's plan is not for us to be suffering. God's plan is for us to be happy, to flourish, to grow, to be truly happy together with Him, living out the plan that God has for us. Yeah. Yet at the same time, we are very aware that family life and married life are not without their challenges. That's true. And perhaps in some ways we face more challenges today than we did at a certain time. But maybe looking back also, these challenges have always been there. Social norms kind of kept marriages and family together in the past when actually people were really suffering. Today maybe people feel a lot more free to go their own way. And so it's not something that is new in some sense. But there are also some other worrying trends with family life and the struggles and challenges that families face today. Now, yesterday, if you joined in, you would have heard from Professor Stella Kwa, who was talking about some of the challenges that families face today, some of the latest trends that we know from statistics and data. The pandemic has also caused a fair amount of chaos It's really challenged a lot of families in how they live, how they see their roles together, and perhaps there were many families who were very happy with the X amount of time that they spend together every day and every week. And the next thing along comes the circuit breaker, and everybody is forced to stay at home and see each other for 24 hours a day. And that starts to cause some tension, in the family. So how do we kind of work around it? His Grace, the Archbishop, also gave an address before this, and he talked about the part that I picked up the most was about youth. I spent many years of my early years in my religious life and priesthood working with young people. And when I met so many youth who were at risk, almost for certain you would see some kind of breakdown in the marriages of their parents. It's almost a cause and effect thing. Yeah. And that kind of led me to think a lot about the kind of ministry that I was doing and how I was reaching out to young people. And so for me, there's a little bit of a heart now to reach out to families and to couples, because I've kind of seen the impact that it has on the young people today. Okay, let's move on and take a look at Amoris Laetitia again. And we're going to look at some of the challenges that Pope Francis says that families face today. Okay, we're going to look at about 6 of them, and I'll go through them a little bit briefly in the PowerPoint that is on the screen. On your screen, I have given you the numbers, the paragraph numbers that refer to the sections in AL, and you can go and read some more and get more details. Okay, so the first challenge that Pope Francis talks about is individualism. Now, these days, people might have an understanding of freedom and value their freedom very greatly, but do they have a correct sense of freedom? Or do they have a warped sense of freedom? Now, today, maybe freedom is often, how do I say this? A lot of people value very highly their autonomy, their independence, their ability to choose. My life is my life to live. I'll do what's good for me. So I will do me, and you do you. And what I like to do is an expression of myself, and what you do is an expression of yourself. So you accept me, I accept you, we all do who we are, and in that sense, we are all supposed to be happy. If we kind of absolutize that kind of life, then what happens when we are confronted with having to make a commitment in our life? And so commitment now becomes a real difficulty for people who value their freedom, or value their freedom in the wrong way. Now, some 20 years ago or so, I joined the Redemptorist congregation, and that came to a time in my life when I was asked to make my profession. I make vows of poverty, chastity, and obedience, and promise to live my life according to the mission of the congregation that I'm committing myself to, the Redemptorists. Now, that's a pretty scary thing, because when we read our vows, I'm saying my name, and I'm saying poverty, chastity, and obedience, which have an impact on my life. And at the end of it, I'm saying that I'm going to do all these things for the rest of my life. Goodness, that is really scary. Now, that's the same kind of commitment that people have to make when they get married. I take you, so-and-so, to be my husband, my wife, and I promise to be true to you until the end of my life. That is supposedly a very long time. And so, in that sense, I am sacrificing some of my freedom. I'm letting go of things that I want to do and I like to do in order, and in some ways I'm going to be limited. And is that something that people are ready to commit to these days? And for many people, that's really a bridge that is becoming harder and harder to cross. Okay. The second thing that Pope Francis looks at is delayed marriage. Lots of couples today are delaying their marriage for a number of reasons. First of all, we place a lot of emphasis on tertiary education, and going beyond tertiary education, even postgraduate education, which is now seen as the entry level to any kind of career that you want. Now, say with men in Singapore finishing university at around 24, maybe, and then if they want to move on some more and get even postgraduate studies, travel overseas, see the world, you know, sow their wild oats, whatever else that they feel they want to do. And the kind of thing, we kind of feel like, okay, all these things I need to get out of my system, before I settle down. And so, for a number of reasons, couples are delaying their marriage, not only to their late 20s. This is now delayed into their early to mid, even to their late 30s. And it's not only about education. The next thing, you got to get a house. Getting a BTO flat in Singapore is like striking 4D. You got to apply, I don't know how many times before you get, and some couples don't really want to move ahead until they have their own place, because maybe they feel that's the proper way to start off their families. And so that leads to further waiting as well. Career is a big thing. If you want to launch your career, it requires a certain kind of commitment or sacrifice to your company, to give yourself not just 9 to 5 or 44 hours a week. It's a huge commitment. And people just can't see themselves doing both that and starting out in the first years of their married and family life with young children or whatever at that stage in time. So get this career thing sorted out first, and then I'll get married. Now, tied to that now is also financial stability. And in financial stability, we're not just talking about a husband and wife who have a dual income. We're talking about some kind of stability that goes even beyond that. A really comfortable nest egg, for them to build on. Now, if couples are spending $100,000 just on their wedding day, and it's good that COVID now has saved a lot of couples a lot of money, is this all starting off on the right foundation? Yeah? Have we considered what is really important when it comes to making decisions like this to start on our family life? Okay? So you can reflect what's the impact of constantly delayed marriage, particularly that we see in Singapore and other developed countries. The third challenge is children, or the lack thereof. A lot of couples these days don't really want to have children. Sometimes delayed marriages also affect fertility. And so now it's not so easy for couples to have children now in their mid to late 30s because they've delayed marriage so long. Do you know that Singapore has the third lowest birth rate in the world? Yeah, there are lots of people who are much more qualified to say more about this than I am. But just from simple fact checking, we find that Singapore has the third lowest birth rate in the world after Taiwan and South Korea. We have a birth rate in 2019 of 1.14. And that's continuing to fall by about a percentage point every year. And if we see that it's a general norm to understand it, that 2.3 is the replacement birth rate. That means with a birth rate of 2.3, you replace all the population that dies, to replace your parents. 1.14 to 2.3 is a big step. Okay, and that's going to be something that is really difficult for us here in Singapore. A fourth point, weakening of faith. So many of y'all in the Padlet, question on what is a Catholic family, talked about God and faith at the center of what people are, of what the Catholic family is all about. Yeah, and I think what we see in many families today is a kind of is a vague faith. Can I call it that? We believe in God. We are Catholic. We are baptized. We'll send our children to baptism and catechism class. But faith is still kept at a certain corner of the house, and is not really at the center of what the family is doing. Yeah. And so when we say that the family prays together, I would have a real fear that there would be many people, many families who don't really know how to do this. Yeah. And certainly the pandemic has caused some real difficulty in this area, because for so many years we have been going to church And this is how I describe the going to church experience, You drive your car to church, a warden will tell you where to park. After that, a hospitality minister will show you to your seat. They will give you a book, or the readings will be flashed on the screen. A priest will come up and tell you what the scripture readings are about. A choir will lead you in singing, and other people will pray your intentions for you. And all you need to do is sit there and put some money into the box when the hospitality minister comes around, and then you get back in your car and you go home. If you're not happy about anything, you can write to the PPC or the parish priest to complain about it, and they'll set it right next week. So we have been very used to receiving in the faith, So now that many of us can't go to church every Sunday, I've got to lead my family at home in prayer. And because all my life, other people have been showing me how to pray, I've never actually developed the skill to be able to pray myself, let alone lead my family in prayer. So I think weakening in faith is something that's really important. On top of that, we can also say that, okay, if you have children and you want them to succeed and do well in life, what's the motivation for that? Let's say they're not really academically inclined, and they're going to just get by in life, doing an ordinary job. Nothing wrong with that. But what is the motivation for them to do better or to succeed? Yeah. Now, without faith, without that moral compass, without the understanding that all people are children of God, that everybody has their gift and talent, are we going to veer towards very materialistic and worldly values that may lead us on the wrong path, in the wrong direction? Okay. A fifth challenge is migration. Perhaps not something that we see a lot in Singapore, and I'm not talking about families who uproot and migrate the whole family somewhere else. I'm talking about people who would leave their home countries, including their spouses and their children, their families behind, and come here and work by themselves and stay here on, say, 2-year contracts, but they can end up staying 4 years, 6 years, 10 years, 20 years. And in all that time, their spouses and their children are back in their home countries. They've missed seeing their children growing up. Their children are growing up without their father or without their mother. And the real cause behind them making this decision is poverty. They have no choice but to leave their families behind and come back, because otherwise the family simply cannot make ends meet. Can you imagine the sacrifice that is involved in this? Yeah. Now, having been a missionary for some years of my life in another country, and I've met children who have been left behind in their homes, in those places, coming to places like Singapore to work, and listening to them and hearing what their experience is like in life. Yeah, I remember when I was preaching at a church in Philippines one weekend. I was there for a number of years, and I met this young lady who later on became a friend of mine. And one day I was talking to her, and she says, I don't really know my mother. My mother's been working overseas for 20 years, and she's 21. And she hardly knows her mom at all, and she was brought up by her grandmother and extended family. Amoris Laetitia says that this can be a particularly dramatic and devastating impact on families. And Singapore is right in the midst of this, because there are 2.1 million foreign workers working here in Singapore, many of them having left their families behind to come here to work for us. Okay, and a sixth and final point is the church's ministry. You'll be surprised to know the number of things that are happening in the church today. In yesterday's session, Ben, one of the board members of CFL, was talking about the church's ministry as its best kept secret. We are doing a lot of things in the church. There's so many ministries outreaching to so many people, but I think it's just in our Catholic culture to always minister undercover, Whenever we want to do something, we want to make sure that nobody hears about it. So all these ministries reaching out to really abandoned people on the peripheries, and we just don't know about it. And then when we talk about the church, you say, the church is doing nothing. What is the church doing? But actually, we are doing quite a lot of things. You'll meet a number of groups this afternoon who are going to be sharing with you the amazing ministry that they're doing with families, and especially families in need. Yeah. But Pope Francis still asked the question in Amoris Laetitia, are there deficiencies in the church's outreach? Have we helped or have we contributed to the problem? And he says that one of the difficulties, which the Archbishop also mentioned earlier today, is that we kind of base family around theories, theological theories. So when we say things like, the Catholic family is meant to be an image of the Holy Family. Okay, that all sounds very nice on paper, but how is it actually lived out on a day-to-day basis in people's homes? That's the question, yeah? In Amoris Laetitia, Pope Francis, he never minces his words, he says things very clearly. And he says, artificial theological ideal of marriage far removed from concrete situations. So we're just simply imposing rules on people, are we? Are we just imposing rules on people that you have to do this, this, and this, and this, and if you don't, then you don't meet the ideals of what a Catholic family should be? Or are we making a genuine commitment to accompany families in their brokenness, accompany families who are living at the peripheries of society? Okay, enough of the challenges, okay? I just told you that marriage is good news, and then I went on for 10 minutes talking about all the challenges that families face. But let's get back to the good news, okay? And I've got 3 passages here from the scriptures that I'd like to share with you to prove to you that marriage is good news. So I'm going to read out the first one from the book of Genesis, okay? That's where it all begins, right? So verses 27 to 31 of the first chapter of Genesis. So God created humankind in his image. In the image of God he created them. Male and female he created them. God blessed them, and God said to them, be fruitful and multiply, and fill the earth and subdue it, and have dominion over the fish of the sea, and over the birds of the air, and over every living thing that moves upon the earth. God said, see, I have given you every plant yielding seed that is upon the face of all the earth, and every tree with seed in its fruit. You shall have them for food, and to every beast of the earth, and to every bird of the air, and to everything that creeps on the earth, everything that has the breath of life, I have given every green plant for food. And it was so. God saw everything that he had made, and indeed it was very good. And indeed it was very good. That is the purpose of the book of Genesis, to remind its readers, to remind the people of Israel that the world in which we live in, the human experience that we are experiencing on a daily basis, is all part of the plan of God, and that God has created all of this for the purpose of order and of goodness, for our joy and our happiness. None of this is random. None of this has just happened out of a big bang created out of chaos that has no objective or goal. There is a God that is behind all of this, and he has created all of us and everything that we experience in life for his glory and for our happiness. That's what the book of Genesis really wants to tell us. And it wants to say furthermore that it's when we are open to live the plan of God in our lives, that's where we find our ultimate joy and fulfillment in life. Okay? A second passage from the first letter of Paul to Timothy is quoted by Pope Francis in Amoris Laetitia number 61, and it reminds us again, everything created by God is good, and nothing is to be rejected. And so, yes, it doesn't mean that good means that there will be no problems. Good doesn't mean that we are perfect, Good doesn't mean there'll be no challenges or difficulties along the way. But even in these challenges, there are blessings. And if we believe at the end of the day that God is the author of marriage and family life, then it is meant for a good purpose. And finally, Jesus' teaching on the indissolubility of marriage in Matthew chapter 19. We had this as our reading on Sunday Mass, right? About 2 or 3 weeks ago, I think it was. This is where Jesus reiterated or restored God's plan for marriage in a very, very unmistakable way. And he ends with a challenge. Not everybody can accept this teaching because it is very difficult. But for those of us who can accept it, then let us be faithful to what God always had in mind for the sacrament of marriage. Those are difficult words. And perhaps for us, we might be looking at ourselves and thinking, am I one of those people who can accept this? I would say that every couple that comes together has the intention of staying together. And so they want to try to live this out as best as they can. But yet, the teaching of Jesus and the church's attempt to be faithful to the teaching of Christ is now less than popular, let's say. With more and more marriages falling into crisis and more couples finding it hard to give a lifetime commitment for one reason or another, the church's firm stand on the indissolubility of marriage is a teaching that is now less than popular. So with more and more marriages going into crisis, there seems to be a call for the church to relax its teachings, to change its teachings, and some people even seeing the good news that the church is trying to preach has now become a bad news for people because it's like this big millstone around their neck, having to live out a commitment that they just simply don't have the capacity to do anymore. And a lot of people are talking about how because of the church's rules, a lot of people are stuck in marriages that are really unhappy, sometimes even violent. A lot of people today also would ask whether the church's teachings are overly idealistic. And they would have arguments like, this is all very nice, God created them male and female, and they are meant to stay together forever and all that sort of thing, and happiness and joy. But, we live in a real world, and in the real world, we have this problem and that problem and all that sort of thing. So it's almost as if there is a dichotomy between what is God's plan and the supposed real world that we are living in. And it seems to a lot of people today that the two cannot really be matched. And then we got a problem, isn't it? Because how do we be faithful to the revelation and plan of God and at the same time situate ourselves within the real life experiences of people as well? So here's the point. I think when we look at the churches, when God's revelation to the church and to humanity, it's about accepting the teaching of the church and the revelation of God in faith. That's what we have to do. The church's teachings may not always be the most popular, but we are asked to accept them in faith. And it's not just about a blind obedience. I think when we have a faith in God, a God who created us and who created us to be happy, this is a God who wants us to flourish in life and to be happy. And so when we place our trust in a God who wants our happiness and fulfillment more than anything else, then we feel happy enough to go along with the plan of this God. That's what faith is, or one way we can describe faith in this situation. We've just got about 4 minutes left. So in Catechism 1601, you can go and look that up, and it talks about the 5 hallmarks of a Catholic marriage. It's between a man and a woman, in a partnership for life, that is unitive. It means they come together and love one another and help each other to grow, accompany and journey with each other through life by giving each other their support and love. It's procreative, which means the purpose of that marriage is to procreate and to have children. And finally, it is something that is raised by the church and by Christ as a sacrament. It becomes now a sign, a sacramentum, is a sign of God's love of the world. So what is a Catholic family? I'll go back to that and end off on that point, okay? St. Alphonsus, the founder of the Redemptorists, would say that we are called to live out holiness in the situation that we are in today. And so the Catholic family is the place where we live out holiness and where we become holy. The Second Vatican Council, in the document Lumen Gentium, brought back this idea of the family as the domestic church from the writings of the great Eastern Father St. John Chrysostom. And so the family now becomes a little church, as it were. You know, you've got your parents who are leading, guiding, governing, shepherding the family. You've got your children who are being catechized and being raised in the faith. You've got your own little community going there where you love each other and support each other through thick and thin, through high and low moments. The faith is being passed on. This is a community that comes together to worship. And in some way, you are like a little microcosm of the big church. You worship together, you pray together, you catechize one another, you help each other to grow, and you have fellowship and community life. So in that way, the Catholic family is like a little domestic church. And what is the purpose of this? The purpose of this is for you to go out and to evangelize, to go out and to share the faith. And it's built on the foundation of faith that you have in your family. So how do we evangelize? Pope Paul VI, in his document Exhortation Evangelii Nuntiandi of 1975, talked about evangelization in two levels, in witness and in proclamation. And the witness that you give as a family is the life that you live as a family together, in the way that the spouses love each other unconditionally and faithfully, in the way that you sacrifice for your children, in the way you are gentle and firm with them, in the way that you educate them and bring them up in the faith, in the way you support them when they fail and when they fall, when you fight and make up with each other again, that despite your difficulties and struggles, you still love one another unconditionally. This is the witness that the Catholic family gives to the world. And when you live your life like that, people are going to take notice. They're going to see how you live your life, and they will ask a very important question. Why is this family like this? What motivates them, or what inspires them to live in this way? And this now is the door that the Holy Spirit is opening for you to share with people what is your motivation and inspiration. It's your faith. It's your faith in Christ. It's your faith in God. It's your Catholic faith that inspires you and motivates you to live that way. And you can share that with people. And that is how you become a Catholic family, by participating in the church's mission. And that's what a Catholic family is. A Catholic family is a family that is an agent of the mission of the church. A Catholic family is one that evangelizes. It shares the good news of Jesus Christ with all around them. A Catholic family is where the faith is lived, that inspires and motivates you to live out your faith and to share that faith with others. Okay? Thank you. And now that brings us to the end of our first segment, or our first input. Okay? We haven't quite finished yet, okay? Because we have one more thing to do. We're going to go back to Padlet now, and we're going to initiate a discussion among all of us, okay? Pope Francis has got the synodal process going, right? So we all talk and listen to each other, okay? So what we're going to look at is the second question, okay, that you see on your screen. How does a Catholic family evangelize? Now, what I shared with you just now is only the tip of the iceberg, okay? It's only just the beginning. But maybe you tell me a little bit more about your family life and what ideas and thoughts you might have about how a family can be an evangelizing family today. Okay? How, as a family, would you like to live your Catholic faith and in that way share it with others? Okay? Love to, waiting for your responses and would love to engage with them. Okay, so off you go. Get going. thanks for your responses. You can keep on typing. We've got about 15 or so minutes to try to engage with some of the comments that have been just put up. Okay. I'll pick up on what is one of the shortest comments or suggestions, but I think perhaps one of the most important. And it simply says to be a good neighbor. And I'm taking neighbor in this case to be the actual person who lives next door to somebody else. And we've all had so many, or many people at least have terrible experiences with their neighbors. They dirty the place, they complain, they make noise. And perhaps some of you attending today would have experience of horrible neighbors. So I think doing such a simple thing as being a kind and considerate neighbor to your neighbors, the people who live next door to you, goes a long way in being a witness of the gospel in our lives. And it really starts off with things as simple as that. Okay, I'll pick up on a couple of comments here that appear at the top. One says that inviting small groups of two, now two lah, maybe one day it'll be 5, over to your house and to watch Mass online together and to break the word together. There's another comment very similar to that, and that's reaching out to other parents who are going through toughness, difficult time. Be a small community of Christian community of faith to each other and journey together. Excellent. Have you ever thought of just inviting another couple to come over to your house and watch Mass together? Yeah. Or inviting another family's kids to come and watch the children's Mass with your kids, yeah? Brought to you every week by St. Max. Those are ways in which we can evangelize and share the faith with one another. This synodal process, we are being reminded by Pope Francis that all of us are co-responsible for the mission of the church, yeah? And so it's not only the role of the priests who are celebrating the children's Mass or the catechists in the church who are catechizing your children who have the ultimate and sole responsibility for sharing the faith with your kids and with other people's kids. We are all involved and are agents in this mission of evangelization and catechesis. Yeah? And so, if children are being brought up in families, and that's where they first pick up the faith, then families who can support one another to share the faith with their children is something that is very powerful and very helpful. Okay? So, maybe some of you can think of things like that. Yeah? Okay. There's a comment on a comment here, and I'll pick up this one because it's about prayer. Okay, if only our homes could be a place where kids learn to say heartfelt prayers. Example, I pray with my sister who is exam stress. I pray at Christmas dinner, and I pray a gratitude, a thanks to my mom. Yeah, if you go to a retreat or a recollection, say your ministry recollection or what in church, what's the most painful time of the recollection? The most painful time of the recollection is the grace before meals. Because we will stand there in front of this buffet and we all stare at each other. Nobody wants to eat because first, before we eat, we have to pray and nobody knows how to pray. So if there's a priest around, the priest has to say the grace before meals, otherwise tak pakai, And then after that, the lay people, if they are being arrowed to pray, they will all be arrowing each other. So just saying a simple grace before meals for the average Catholic is the equivalent of going to the dentist and having your teeth pulled out, So where has this tradition gone to be able to pray? Yeah? And so I guess when we raise our kids at home, just giving them the confidence to lead prayer at the dining table or to lead the family prayer one night helps them to develop this confidence to be able to articulate what is it that we ask of God to be able to articulate our need for God in our lives. Now, another thing that it does that is very important is it helps young people to be empathetic towards the needs of other people and to be aware of the situations that are happening in the world. Now, do our young people, when they gather together for prayer, are they, say, aware of the situation that is happening now in Ethiopia? Are they aware of that climate conference that's going on in Glasgow? Were they aware of the Rohingya crisis that was happening a couple of years ago and the refugee crisis, both of these still going on? And then when I learn to articulate a prayer for them, we are actually learning the value and the virtue of empathy. Because now not only am I aware of another person's problem, I am joining myself and uniting myself to those people in a kind of solidarity, in the way that I offer a prayer for them. So these are important ways in which we can form our young people and also form ourselves. It's really important. Okay, let's pick up another one. Yeah, even simple acts like being nice and gentle to one another when it's hard is living out our faith, practicing forgiveness when others trespass against us. Where better to learn that than the family? Because when you all are living in your house together, they're the people that you see the most often. You bang into each other, you rub against each other, we kind of mess up the house, things are not left in the right place, we get upset and annoyed by people's strange habits, your family members' strange habits. And those are all ways in which we learn patience. That's where it happens, I've always wondered about this. Maybe you must talk to developmental psychologists who know more about these kinds of things. But in the end, we are a product of our parents, right? And I'm talking about genes and DNA, And so I look like some kind of mixture of my mother and father, and my height and my size and all that is determined by the genes in my family. And I wonder whether the same thing happens to character and personality. When I grow up in my home and I have parents who speak respectfully and gently, and that is my experience of growing up in my family all the time, then this is the style of speaking that I will have myself. If I have parents who fly off the handle at every single opportunity or when anything goes wrong, then that's a behavior that a child is going to learn as well. And that's how they're going to deal with problems the next time, because that's what they've learned. So I think being nice to one another and gentle with one another is something so important that has a greater consequence than we can realize. There's something here. Yes. To be courageous to live the faith within themselves and within the family. And I wonder whether there'll be situations in which this kind of courage to live the faith will be really tested. I guess in Singapore we are fortunate to live in a fairly peaceful situation. In other countries their faith is really tested to the maximum, and how difficult it must be for them, and how courageous it calls them to live the faith. But perhaps also one of the ways in which family helps us is there are times in our life where we have to make difficult decisions, and it can be very easy to do something that is against the virtues of the gospel for what might seemingly be a gain for the family. Something that you might do in your business, in your work, to do something that would be against the values of Christ. And can the family now support us to help us to make that difficult and courageous decision to stand by what we believe is the right thing to do? Here's one that I like. I think it comes from a hymn because it sounds familiar. In everything, give thanks and glory to God. Yeah, in everything, give thanks and glory to God. And I think the Catholic family is one that understands that everything that they have in life is a blessing that is given to them by God, and not something that we have only earned by ourselves. Yeah, and I think that understanding of gratefulness and thankfulness to a transcendent and divine being who is our creator and our destiny is something that is at the foundation of a Catholic family. Here's a very interesting one. We evangelize to our non-Catholic in-laws by how we live together as a family, sharing our faith in God, how we respond to situations and events in our lives in a God-fearing way, how we treat our domestic helper, etc. I'll pick up on that last one on the domestic helper. It's one of those very simple but very difficult ways in which we share the faith. Yeah, when we bring domestic helpers into our home, it kind of disrupts the family life in some way until we get used to living together again, and then it also leads to certain demands and expectations that we have of them, and it's very difficult for them, I think, to adapt not only to life in Singapore, to a new culture, a new way of a new language and way of speaking, but just the demands that you may have of your home, you know. So your patience and respect that you give to a domestic helper who lives in your home is a huge witness that you give to your children. Yeah. Now I remember when I was growing up, we had a helper who lived with us for a short period of time, and my parents would not tolerate any kind of disrespect or anything if I had shown to her, you know. And I took call her by a certain name, you know. In our family, I would address her as Akka, which is a Tamil word for older sister. So we learn these kinds of things, and it's something that we practice. Yeah, I hope in our Redemptorist community we do the same. We have cleaners and cooks who work with us and look after our home and create our meals every day. And I think it's important for us to just go to them every day whenever we see them, and just to say thank you. Yeah, just at the end of the meal when we bring our dishes to the sink and wash it ourselves, and just to say thank you so much for cooking for us. It was a lovely meal, you know. God bless you. And it makes such a big difference. And if that's kind of thing that happens in your home, I think that's where the Catholic values and virtues are really being lived. Okay? Bible. Good one. Only one word is written there, Bible. So I assume that's speaks for itself. Okay, no, there's more to it. Read the Bible daily together and break the word as a family, even if it's just for 15 minutes. Very good. There's so many applications and systems out there, you know, for you to go and read the Bible, and guides for you to get through the Bible together as a family. Sometimes we don't know how to use it. It's not meant to be a book to read from cover to cover, you know. And then if you start going into the book of Leviticus and all that, that's when your children start falling asleep. But there's a system in this, you know, as to how we journey through the Bible together. So it's something that can be very engaging for your children as well. Okay. Catechism. Parents should deepen our catechism knowledge and then pass it on to their children. Now, if some of you all are catechists in this group, they will be thrilled to hear that, because catechists have always been telling me this for years. Okay, we cannot carry the whole can of educating these young people in the faith. It has to be a journey that begins at home. Okay, you can't be sending your children to catechism like some tabula rasa, you know, with an empty slate. It's got to be something that builds. Yeah, the catechist only has 1 hour with your kids a week. You are staying with them at home every day, and so they're going to look to you first of all as the example of faith. And as the Archbishop had said this morning, it's not about head knowledge, that I learn my catechism so I can explain to them some doctrines of the faith. Yes, it may come in important at some point in time, but I think more than anything else, they want to see you living it. Okay, it's something that you live out on a day-to-day basis, and that is what is going to make a difference for them. Okay. So just let me end off with a teaching from St. Alphonsus, which I hope will round up what we have been talking about today. I have to take from St. Alphonsus. I'm not being biased or anything, okay, but we'll take from St. Alphonsus. Okay, what St. Alphonsus says is that when we ask the question, how do we grow in our faith? He says that we grow in our faith by the situation and the vocation of life that we are in. And that for you is in your family. You are helping each other to become saints. In the way that you are forgiven, in the way that you annoy each other, in the way that you support each other when you fail and when you fall, in the way that you get picked up, in the way that you are loved in your imperfection and in your brokenness, husbands and wives, parents and children, you are journeying and accompanying each other on the road to perfection and sainthood. And I think that is another way of looking at a Catholic family. A Catholic family is one family that helps everybody to attain the perfection that is in Christ. Okay, thank you, and that brings us to the end of our first segment.